in Bitcoin a lot, right? And you can kind of see that with a lot of features that end up coming through, even with like the core dev repository and so on. There's a lot of people that think, oh, this sounds cool, or it's conceptually interesting, therefore this is what I should be building. Almost never works that way. It's the best products are almost accidental, and you're almost flooded with demand, right? Because you go and make instead of like making something and then trying to market it, you find people are asking you to build you something, and you go and build it, and it's like, oh, they have a friend that also wants the same thing, and they have another friend that wants the same thing, and that's at least for me. And I've worked at like 13 startups. I'm like a startup veteran from like, you know, the .com days, right? So that's how old I am. Almost everything where somebody tries to make a product and then market it versus, you know, sort of like demand that's almost organic. The organic thing wins every time. And the two companies where I had an exit by doing an IPO in the public markets, they both ended up that way. One was Athena Health. I don't know if you know about that company, but I was there before we went public. And the company started initially as a way to manage OB-GYN practices, and they found this huge pain point where they couldn't get paid on their billing, right? Like trying to figure out how to deal with all the insurance people. So one of the founders hired his brother to go fix it, and he did a pretty good job. And then every other OB-GYN in the area wanted the same thing because that was their pain point, and then that became their business, right? It was almost accidental. They didn't want to do that. So that would be the big mistake that I think most founders make, especially early stage, is trying to build something that you want and then see if you can market it. Like almost always that's a mistake. Go listen to the market first, right? That'll almost always get you better data.
Yeah, would you necessarily say it's easier to see what's out there in the Bitcoin space and then see if there's a need for it if they don't have product market fit from the beginning, or should they just go and start working for a Bitcoin company as a good first option to learn from other builders, other people that have done it?
Yeah, for me, if you're gonna be building on Bitcoin, I would suggest you go into a completely different industry first. Like anything on Bitcoin has been built to death. There's already 30 startups that are probably trying to do what you're doing. The big opportunity right now is going into a traditional business and figuring out how to integrate Bitcoin, whether it's in the treasury or like payments or something else. There's usually a strategy that you can integrate Bitcoin in that will make that business significantly more money. But the problem is that like Bitcoiners just want to build Bitcoin stuff, when really like the world is your oyster, right? Like there's so many opportunities where if you just figure out a few ways to save money in various processes, you can be their hero. But you know, like first of all, if you're gonna go in there as like a junior programmer, you're not gonna like upend the business, right? Like and change their business model. You have to sort of like prove yourself there first. But the big opportunities are in the intersection between traditional businesses and Bitcoin, and it's those that are not getting exploited at all right now.
Jimmy, do you think it's because of that hurdle rate and why it's so hard with being a Bitcoin company? You have to beat the purchase. You know, you have to beat the purchasing price of Bitcoin. Like, is it because of that? That's a constant thing that we're facing as builders or companies in Bitcoin.
Yeah, we're in a really weird state, right? Because for Bitcoiners, they already know what kind of rate they can get just on Bitcoin. I mean, you're easily getting 20% a year, right? Like most years, like this past year, it's like 100%. The year before that, it was 100%. The year before that, it was 100%, right? It's like that's pretty hard to beat. you're not going to be able to convince a lot of people to part with their Bitcoin for your business. So what's happened is that with most Bitcoin businesses, they go out and get money from the fiat. So they get it from VCs, they get it from hedge funds, angel investors, people that don't know that much about Bitcoin. They think, well, this is my Bitcoin proxy. But then, like, they do the math later, and they're like, I could have just bought Bitcoin, I'd be like way better off. And that, but you have to realize, like, the hurdle to get money from an angel or a VC is much, much lower than from a Bitcoiner. And that's kind of the problem, is that you end up playing more a fiat game, which is grow really big, right? Show big numbers, lots of customer acquisition, doesn't matter if you're losing money. And then you raise like another round that's bigger. That's the game that you play in sort of like the traditional fiat VC world, where you have to continuously grow and like down round this debt or something like that, right? So you don't want to. And a lot of Bitcoin companies end up having to play both sides, and it doesn't work out that way, because they're being fed like a slaughterhouse pig, right? With cash injections and stuff like that. And if they're smart, they convert a lot of it into Bitcoin early on, and they can like coast for a while and try to figure out fire market fit. But largely, like, their VCs won't let them or something like that, and then they end up like trying to make something work, and then like they end up like kind of failing on that regard. There's the world that we're leaving, which is like fiat and VC money, that's just abundant printed money out of nothing, right? Almost all, this is a big secret about like VC money, guys. The LPs that are contributing to your VC fund, they're getting loans on their property that they already own. It's money printed out of nothing, right? Like when they get their capital calls, they're taking out loans against like their $40 million mansion in the Hamptons, right? It's not money from their savings. So it's always printed money that's coming into the VC that ends up finding its way into startups. But Bitcoin is sound money. So to get that off of a Bitcoiner's hand, that's like, man, that's gonna be really tough, because you're gonna have to present a really, really good opportunity. And I think that's the world we're headed into, is where you're going to have opportunities that are just so good, that are so compelling, so obvious, that people are like, okay, I'll partner with my Bitcoin to do that. But in the meantime, we're in between both stages, and you're not able to get the returns for either one that makes sense. You're not profitable enough at the beginning for the second crowd, which is the Bitcoin crowd, and you're not growing fast enough for the fiat crowd. So it's a very tough place to be as a Bitcoin builder.
Yeah. So we've been doing startups through Club Lab. That was one of the things that I was wrestling with from the very beginning. And I was talking to Steen when I was in San Antonio for G's meetup, and he said the same thing too. He was like, "Are you being honest with these founders that are coming in?" And I was like, "Yes." I was like, I'm actually wrestling myself, because I was on the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute, and I was looking through some of the old documents on there, and they were talking about the same thing that we're talking about now, like the hurdle rate and all that stuff. And so this is a thing that's been on the minds of Bitcoiners for the entire time. This is not a new thing, which I found really fascinating.
Yeah, it's logical, and you can derive it from first principles. It's just
Right.
like, it hits a little different when you're a founder and you're running a Bitcoin business and you can't raise money because you're not growing fast enough. But maybe you're a little profitable, right? Or the other way, where you're growing really fast, but no one will give you money because you're not profitable, right? Like, you're kind of screwed both ways as a Bitcoin business, which is why I'm telling you, like, go to a traditional business, figure out a way to integrate Bitcoin. That's probably the best art play that you have right now as a founder. Because if you do that, then, well, first of all, you can just plow all the money that you raise into Bitcoin, right? That gives you a way much longer runway. That gives you more time to go find product market fit and be profitable very early, rather than, like, grow at all costs, which is the fiat. So, I mean, it's kind of a weird and tough environment, but if you can figure it out, you can make a lot of money. And there's a lot of arbitrage opportunities.
So I want to get into some of the filter stuff because I know you have you've been doing a lot of these vlogs on your Twitter and stuff. So let's switch gears to that. So just in simple terms, like what's going on with the whole Bitcoin Core version 30, the filter stuff, and what does that mean to the people in the audience that don't understand that?
Yeah, I don't know if it means all that much, to be honest with you, but
I think you explained it really well with as a user of Bitcoin, like you know, because they all hold Bitcoin, and we just pull everybody.
Yeah. So as a user of Bitcoin,
Yeah.
So the actual change is that you have something called relay policy that every node has, right? These are transactions that you relay to other nodes that you're connected to. And this is basically how transactions propagate through the network. And the policy is you you continue relaying certain kinds of transactions and you stop relaying other kinds of transactions. So for example, transactions greater than 100,000 bytes are not relayed. And this is partly because from a network perspective, those are kind of big. And if you have replaced by fee on a 150,000 byte transaction, that's another 150,000 bytes. And you know, you can DDoS like nodes that way very easily if they get too big and so on. There are many reasons for different filters on relay policy. There's a particular field in Bitcoin. There's an output that you can have that's worth exactly 0 satoshis called op return. And this is a place to sort of like dump random messages. And this was done so that, at least early on, so that protocols that were sort of color point based would not be dumping data into the UTXO set. And that was the point of doing all of that. And they limited it at first to 40 bytes. Later they doubled that to 80 bytes, and it stayed more or less around 80 bytes right up until now. And the reason why they changed that was because of a project called BitVM. There's a company called Citria, which is developing BitVM, and it's a different kind of smart contract platform in the sense that if you're familiar with smart contracts on Ethereum, for example, the entire thing has to be run by every node, right? Which is why they have like 5 nodes, because nobody wants to do all that work. But everybody runs every smart contract. The way BitVM works is that only the people that are interested run it, and if I can prove that you ran it wrong, then I can take it running, right? Like, so everyone is incentivized to run the smart contract the right way. Anyway, they are building this entire system, and they have this need to, in an emergency, write 160 bytes into a single transaction that gets into the blockchain very quickly. And they told this to one of the core devs, and they were like, oh, well, why aren't you using op return? Because it's only 80 bytes. So instead, we're going to use 5 paid to taproot outputs with 32 bytes each. That would be 160 bytes of arbitrary data, 5 UTXOs that will never get pruned. And the developer was like, okay, we're going to go change this. So they went back to core, they put in a pull request saying, okay, let's just remove this limit altogether and delete the option for users to change it. That was the first pull request, which with enough community uproar was rescinded. They changed it to, well, we're going to deprecate this feature, and we're going to cap it from 80 to 100,000 bytes, which seems like a little bit of an overreaction, don't you think, right? Like, they need 160, they're going all the way to 100,000. So that's kind of what happened, and then there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened with Libre Relay, and just sort of, quote unquote, proving that filters don't work, and there were other, there was this whole thing with like below 1 sat per VByte transactions that were getting to the miners through Libre Relay, so then they added that as part of Core V30, where now the minimum fee rate for a node for relay is now 0.1 sat per V-byte instead of 1. So, those are all things that have sort of happened as a result. And there's a lot of uproar because 100,000 bytes is like enough to put in like a short video or audio or picture or whatever, and you know, a lot of people are in an uproar about that. Despite the fact that you could do inscriptions using Taproot, that's about the same size or bigger. And you know, you get the witness discount, so you don't have to pay as much and so on. So there's a lot of controversy around this, and there's a bunch of people that are just kind of confused what's going on. A lot of core devs seem very insistent on getting this in and removing the option eventually. And yeah, I just something smells a little bad.
But as a user of Bitcoin, somebody, because we just polled everybody holds Bitcoin in here, Jimmy.
Yeah,
so
yeah. How's it relate to that?
why should I care? Why do filters work? Like, why
Okay,
does
so
that matter?
why does it matter to the end user, to the person that's holding Bitcoin? Well, first of all, it's essentially making it easier for spammers to spam, right? Though you know there are other methods. The thing about op return is that it only requires a single transaction. Anything inscription related, you have to use 2, unless you're using a control block. But then it has to be like a multiple of 32 and all this other stuff. There are ways to do other things, but the main thing is that you can basically put in you know, random data into op return, so that prices your transactions out a little bit, right? The more of those there are. Now, economically, I don't think spam is the trolling value of spam will go down eventually, right? Like that's what a lot of that is. But it does sort of clog the mempool, right? It makes it so that there's that your transactions cost more, your Lightning channel opens cost more, and your Lightning channel closes cost more as a result of that. There's also the fact that there's probably going to be more blockchain growth, right? Especially as you get down with the minimum fee being 0.1 sat per V-byte. If that becomes standard, then, you know, like you saw for a while there, the mempool was completely full, and there was like 200 megabytes worth of 1 sat per V-byte transactions that took a long time to clear. Imagine if it was like 0.1. That could be a lot more, right? Like it can be a significant amount, and that could, you know, that'll cause like your mempools to be full, right? Almost always. Not that that's necessarily too bad, right? Like, but it would be running faster and more efficiently. You're also using some of your upload bandwidth for a lot of this stuff that you weren't relaying before, which if you're using a typical ISP, they limit your upload. Even if you have like a lot of download, you know, usually the ratio is like something like 10 to 1. They expect you to upload a lot less than download, and that's the part that gets used up when you're doing the relay. If you're running your own node as a listening node. So those are a few. I mean, I'm sure there's more. I haven't thought through all of the consequences for the end user, but ultimately it comes down to your node is going to be using more resources, and the Bitcoin network is going to be a little more clogged. But those are like the more practical, like what happens to my transactions issues. The bigger thing for me is, okay, what happens to the consensus process? Because this was pretty much jammed through by, you know, like maybe 2 dozen people in the face of massive opposition on Twitter and other places. If they can do that with this, is it possible that they can do that with a potential software? In which case, you know, we might have a little more chaos.
And then, so does this all happen when it goes to version 30? Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, so version 30 is slated to release sometime in October. They already have a release candidate one that's out, and it has all of these features.
Does that turn off filters? Is that...
Well, so it sets the data carrier size to 100,000. So transactions that have an op return that like a 5,000 bytes will be relayed by default. So if you're running release candidate one right now, that's what would happen if you received one. If you didn't, you would keep it in, you would keep it around, but you wouldn't relay it to other people. So that's the difference between like relaying and not relaying. But that's you know, for release candidate one that just came out. So you know, we're what, like 2.5 weeks from October, like 2 weeks from October. So within like a month, we're gonna see the release, and that's going to be like the point at which, okay, do people actually upgrade? Because at least if you analyze from a network perspective, if something like 10% of the network is core v30, then that's called the percolation threshold, the point at which transactions will be heard by pretty much everyone on the network, those transactions that they are willing to deal with, because it's a very connected network. So 10% is not that much. So I think the way Adam Back puts it is like the tolerant minority wins in this case. Whoever is more willing, like if you have even a small minority of nodes that are willing to relay this stuff, then it will basically percolate through the entire network.
You talked about why you're against covenants, and I would love for you to kind of explain that more, like on a just like a plain speak version of what is covenants and like why you're like one of maybe every. Is there anybody else against covenants?
Oh, there's a lot.
There's a lot of people just aren't speaking out.
I mean,
it's definitely not the side that everybody chooses, right?
well, so the thing is, if you're for covenants, you have a particular application in mind, so you're very vocal about it. If you're against covenants, you're not really saying it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Right? But the main reason is because
what's covenants?
yeah. So what a covenant is it's locking an output to particular outcomes, right? So a time lock, for example, is a covenant. It's saying, okay, you're not allowed to spend this particular output until 2030, right? You can make that an output on Bitcoin today. So that's a form of a covenant. But what people want is something that's a little more complicated, right? Like a vault would be, okay, you're only allowed to exit this address in 2 different places. It can either go to this exchange or this super multi-sig or something like that. And that's what a covenant is. And you have some of that functionality on Liquid today. Yeah, they enabled a whole bunch of opcodes along with simplicity. So there's a lot possible in it. You can also do it on Bitcoin proper. You can do it today by creating transactions off of your UTXO and throwing the private key away, right? And then just keeping the transactions. In fact, a lot of covenants proposals actually work this way, where you have to pre-sign a whole bunch of stuff. You don't throw your private key away, but there's a lot of pre-signing transactions. So it's not anything really out there, right? Or like completely foreign to the covenants people. So you could do that today. As far as I know, like no one uses it, at least at the user level, right? I mean, maybe there's some guy playing with it in like San Francisco or something, right? Like there's probably people doing something with it somewhere. But at the user level, it hasn't come through. It's not something that you see in Sparrow Wallet, for example, right? Even stuff like time locks.
Nunchucks.
Yeah. Nunchuck has has some of the mini script, but that's a recent thing, and it's like I don't know if anyone uses it yet. But even like time locks, very few people actually use it, and I suspect a lot of it is like just user experience, right? Like how do you get the user to define what the 5 exit points are and that they actually understand what that means, right? And how do you prevent them from shooting themselves in the foot, where all five of them are really the same exit point, and then, oh no, it's only in an emergency, and then, you know, one of their keys goes away, they locked everything out, right? Like, it's an enormous user foot gun, essentially, to enable something like this.
But don't we need to scale to 8 billion people, though, Jimmy?
Well, first of all, I don't think Covenants is going to get you there necessarily.
With 8 billion people, though, Jimmy?
I could get to that later, but Covenants is this thing where a lot of people want these toys, right? And I get it. I'm a developer. I like having toys, right? I like having new primitives. I like having new Lego pieces to build my tower or whatever. But that's not what Bitcoin is for, right? That's not why you change Bitcoin so that developers can have more toys. You change Bitcoin so that the users get more value out of it, right? You change Bitcoin so that everyone grows wealthier in Bitcoin terms because of whatever feature it is that you're doing. So for me, it just doesn't meet that bar, right? Where, for me, Lightning was good enough where doing some sort of soft work, some sort of significant upgrade that everyone had to coordinate in, it was worth it. But Covenants, I really don't think so. And I think at this point we can argue that Taproot wasn't worth it either. Right? Like we spent years on that stuff. Years, right? There's enormous amounts of code in the Bitcoin code base. And what's it being used for? Ordinals, inscriptions, right? Like what the hell, right? It's not, like that's not what we signed up for, but that's what it's ended up being because no one's really built anything compelling, and we sort of did it speculatively instead of, like I was saying in the other part of the talk, actually listening to the market. What do users need? What do users want? And as far as I can tell, there's no big user outcry for Covenants, right? Or any Covenant-related functionality. Or if there is one, no one's articulated it well enough where users are clamoring for it.
Jimmy, do you think there's a responsibility to Bitcoin developers and to the open source community to think about it, to think about the users? Because, and you touched on this on your blog, that, when Taproot and some of these other upgrades happened, there was, 20 billion, 60 billion market cap, right? And now we're at a
6 trillion.
Yeah. So, do you think there's a responsibility to that maybe we're just not taking seriously?
Yeah,
Or responsibility is the wrong word, maybe.
Yeah, the developers are developers, right? And I think, especially from the block size more on, I think they were afforded almost like a saintly status that they didn't necessarily deserve. I mean, everyone's human, right? And they have their own motivations and they have their own interests and so on. And unfortunately, sort of making them into saints was taken a little too seriously, and a lot of people just sort of followed them despite the doubts, right? So one of the things that came out in one of the Taproot postmortems, I guess, reviewing, okay, what happened here, especially with the BIP 8, BIP 9 controversy. I think people wanted to figure out what happened and what went wrong and so on. One of the things that came out was that there were a lot of developers that were like, okay, why are we doing this? I don't want to be the fly in the ointment, and I don't have a big horse in this race, so I'm just not gonna object. There were a lot of developers like that, even within Core, right? But they didn't necessarily, they didn't have the personality to speak out and be loud about it, and these are people that you work with, the people that are doing your code review and stuff. So they're like, you know what, I'm not gonna say anything. And I think for a bunch of them, afterwards, they were like, yeah, I probably should have said something. Because, this thing was kind of complicated, and, we understood what they were trying to do, but it wasn't, they weren't convinced that it was ultimately going to end up with, a good feature for the user. And that was a mistake that I think that was made with Taproot, that we shouldn't be making again.
Do you think we're following that same trend now again, or do you think it's changed a little bit?
Yeah, well, there's no real soft fork on the horizon, right? There maybe like 54 has a chance. I don't know. That's like that time warp attack fix that Matt Corallo and that Darcier guy, I think they authored. But like even that, it's like, and it requires a software, but it's like such a remote and small bug fix that it's like you really want to spend all the software on that. It's like it doesn't seem like. So I'm of the opinion that Bitcoin is pretty much ossified at this point in terms of new features like that, unless it's like super compelling, because the market cap's just too big and the utility is just so great already that it's like, okay, we're using this thing as a store of value. It's doing fantastic. You have to protect that use case almost at all costs over anything else. Because if you screw that up by introducing a new feature, it's over. And I don't think there's any appetite for that kind of risk, especially because there are lots of players in it now. And as soon as they find out something that threatens this use case or anything like that, they'd be like, no. And it's only going to get worse as the market cap grows, because, and this is sort of the nature of consensus systems, is that it's relatively easy to get consensus when you have a small group. But as the group gets larger, it gets harder and harder. And that's kind of a feature out of us, because you're all stakeholders in Bitcoin, right? All of you that own it, you're stakeholders, and you have a say.
And so let's talk about why you brought up an interesting point about not worrying about scaling to 8 billion people, and tell us why that's like a utopian dream. I really love that you said that, because it's true. Like decentralization it happens organically.
Yeah.
It has to come from the ground up, and then guess what happens? And then it sprouts out, and there's this thing that happens somewhere else, and it's organic as well. You see that from the plebs doing that organically, because it has to come from it's decentralization for a reason. So I love that you mentioned that, and can you just talk about why not worrying about scaling to 8 billion people?
Yeah, it bothers me because that's the excuse that people give for centralized action, right? It's like we have to do something. And it's very much from the fiat world. We have to solve world hunger. Therefore, we have to have this government program, right? And it's kind of like that. Because any soft work, any big thing requires a tremendous amount of coordination. And especially in a consensus system, it is extremely difficult, right? Like the last two soft works we went through were very contentious, took a very long time, and I think that was a good thing, right? It needs to go through that kind of scrutiny. But what a lot of people want is their pet feature to come in so that they can have more toys. It's usually a developer. And instead of like building something ahead of time, right? So like the thing that like upsets me about a lot of these people that are saying, okay, we need this opcode or we're not gonna go and scale to 8 billion is, okay, then show me how you're gonna do it, right? Go build some covenant thing that's actually gonna scale. That's going to help or whatever. And I give credit to people like the ARC people, right? Like, it was thought that you needed some sort of covenant opcode to be able to do ARC, but they figured out a way to do it without it. And they're like, okay, now we're going to build it, and we're just going to get it out there, and we're going to prove to you that this is going to be very useful for all of you. And we don't need centralized coordination or consensus changes in order to make this happen. I respect that a lot more than, hey, we need this right now, or we're not. Like it's kind of like a subtle threat, right? It's like, okay, if you don't give me what I want, then we're not going to go where we need to, or something like that. I just think that's bullshit. It's most of the time people saying that want to, like people scaring you in some way is a propaganda tactic, right? You see this in climate change all the time. If we don't do this particular policy action, then we're all gonna be underwater in 5 years, right? Like that, or if we don't go and invade this country, then they're going to nuke us to death, right? Like it's a common tactic, and that's what we're not gonna then Bitcoin is a failed project if we don't get this in, right? Like that's essentially the argument, and that's what I ended up doing.
All right, so I don't want to take up too much of your time before we get to questions, but let's switch gears to the teaching and some of the stuff that you've been doing for a long time, Jimmy. You taught a lot of people in Bitcoin, some of them in this room. What's one thing that you see as a common, just like, I don't know, just like one of the things that either you see time and time again that is either like a thing that surprises you when you're teaching, or something that you're just like, wow, or like something that just wows you or moves you in a way where you're just like, wow, that was a cool experience. I didn't see that happening, or
Well, for me with teaching, and I'm sure all of you have this experience where you went to like grade school, middle school, high school, boring as shit, right? Like it's just like there's some subject that you're not interested in. Maybe it's English literature, maybe it's social studies, maybe it's gym, whatever, right? It's boring. You have no interest in it, and the teacher is just trying so hard to like keep your attention, or if he or she's a bad teacher, just like whatever, and like they like sort of given up on life, right? That was my impression of teaching, right? 'Cause even in college, like a lot of kids just don't care, or they only care about the grade, and it's like not the subject at all. And that was my experience actually even teaching at UT, is that all the students they just want a good grade. Right? It's not the material at all. What's really cool about teaching Bitcoiners that are motivated to learn Bitcoin, that they actually want to learn the material. And as a teacher, that is about the best experience you'll have, is teaching people that want to learn what you want to teach them. Right? And that's what's wrong with the education system. You have people that are teaching oftentimes that don't care about their subject to people that don't care about the subject, right? What do you think is going to happen? It's going to be a disaster. But when you have a teaching environment where people want to learn what you're teaching them, and it's a beautiful experience. And seeing them, and I cram a lot of material into students, and it's really tough. But every single time afterwards, they're like, "Thank you so much." Right? That was awesome. I got to really understand this, and it's something that I'm passionate about, and you really love it. That to me is what teaching should be. And I'm so sad that most teachers in the world don't get to experience that because they're teaching in a fiat system.
Yeah. What's one of the things that you've seen teaching where you're just maybe it's more like maybe you're surprised somebody came in, they had like really little experience in programming or one thing or another, but you were able to get them to maybe turn the leaf and they shock you.
Well, usually they shock me because they have a lot of insight into what they're doing that I don't at all. So, when I started teaching that class, it was I expected it mostly to be programmers, right? Either early to mid-career, looking for opportunities at Bitcoin, and I certainly had a bunch of those, but I got like just random people. I had this one guy that was an accountant that was like 70, and he took my class. I was like, "What the hell are you doing? Why are you taking my class?" And he said, "Well, I'm advising this group on tax treatment for some of the Bitcoin stuff, and I need to understand how this whole thing works." And like a few months later, he wrote me back. He's like, "Okay, because I took your class, I understand how hard forks work. So now I know how to treat a Bitcoin Cash hard fork, like how to whether that's income or capital gains or something else. Like, he was like, I can make the argument because I understand the technology underneath." So you get stuff like that where just like random people show up and they have their own motivations for learning that you never would have thought of. And this is, like in general about building too. A lot of your customers, you're going to aim at a particular group, but you're going to find that you accidentally hit people that you never expected, right? The customer that you never expected to have, and you need to pay attention to those, because oftentimes those are the most popular ones, because they often don't have like the same price sensitivity, or they're so desperate to get the knowledge or whatever your product is, and you never even thought of it, but they're willing to pay for it, right? You need to pay attention to those signals, because those are oftentimes the most popular.
Great stuff. Okay, got two more. These are really quick ones. Give us one unpopular Bitcoin take you think will age well in the future.
We're not going to have any more software.
Really?
Okay.
Wow. Okay. And then, here's a good one. What's a failure that you've experienced as a builder that you're grateful for because it maybe grew a virtue or something, but not just a skill?
Okay. So, 2013, I'm on the Bitcoin platform, and I have been studying elliptic curve cryptography. So I was like, okay, Bitcoin uses it for signing and verification, and I understood elliptic curve cryptography enough to know that you can do the reverse, where you can encrypt something. I found out later there was something called ECIES, which did exactly the same thing, but I was like, oh, I could develop this, so I came up with this protocol. I was really excited, so I went on the Bitcoin pop forums, and it was like new ideas or something. It was moderated by Greg Maxwell, and I posted on there. I didn't know who Greg Maxwell was. I posted on there, and Greg replied, and he's like, okay, well, I'm tagging a couple of other people because I understand you're trying blah blah blah. And he tagged a couple of other people to evaluate what I had written on GitHub. And those two people were Luke Dash Jr. and Andrew Polstra. Luke Jr. and I didn't know either of them at the time. Right? I had no idea who they were. And they started telling me everything that was wrong with my implementation, like just destroying it. Luke in particular was particularly vicious. And I ended up like getting into this very heated argument with him. And again, I don't know who this guy is, right? And at some point I was like, I'm tired of this. I'm muted to that. And then as I got more into the industry and so on, I think it was maybe like 6 months later. There was the Texas Bitcoin conference. It was
the one that what's his name? Cyril?
Yeah. So that was the first one, and I actually met Luke.
Oh, you did? He came down for that. Wow.
He came down for that, and I was like, just wanted to let you know, we haven't met in person, but we did meet online, right? And I'm sorry for what I said or whatever. And he's like, don't worry about it. I don't remember any of that stuff anyway, and it's all wonderful. So I think that was a very good lesson for me because, we tend, I was that guy, I'm new to Bitcoin, here I am to fix it, right? And that's the instinct that most people have coming into it. And I think that episode taught me, okay, you gotta be humble. And whatever brilliance, and I thought it was sort of like ECIES, right? It's like a cool encryption method. I was like, oh, now you can message people that have already spent with using their public key, and you can embed it on chain, and then they can read the message and all that stuff. And they were destroying it for, now I recognize it as correct reasons, right? That's a really stupid idea, right?
Yeah.
You shouldn't be bloating the blockchain with private messages to people that you're trying to communicate with. But I was like, oh, but then you could donate to Edward Snowden, and he would be able to read it, but nobody else, and all this other stuff. Of course, now we have Nostr, and it's way better, and it takes a lot of those ideas. But I had a lot of pride about my thing, and this is something that I think as a builder that it's very easy to get into is falling in love with your own stuff, right? Loving the smell of your own shit, right? As they say, it's you have to be able to see things objectively and a criticism, because if you don't, it's gonna bite you. And this is honestly like the problem with a lot of altcoins. Vitalik still thinks that Ethereum still smells good,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's a complete disaster. But that's how that's how bad things happen and insecure things are made and so on. So.
Yeah, that's why it's so healthy to be around other builders, building, coming up with things like this. You can get feedback and hear from your fellow builders. We're going to open up to questions if anybody has any questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to tie a couple things together between the opportune debate and dire warnings about terrible things happening and how we have to adjust or not adjust Bitcoin to accommodate those fears. You know, the latest thing is that, you know, the opportune change in Core 30 is going to bring CSAM and malware. And it's going to take, you know, all these scanning tools are going to take all cloud nodes down, so we just need to not do it. What do you think about those dire warnings?
I think that's overblown. I'm like the child porn thing has been like a part of the Bitcoin FUD thing since the beginning almost. So hasn't happened up until now. Not to say that it can't happen, but this isn't going to be the vector that's open that makes it particularly vulnerable. Because like the argument has been, okay, well then why hasn't it been mined yet? Well then the miner would be liable. Well then whoever mines it is going to be liable anyway, right? Like in whatever future. So I don't really count that as like a legitimate concern. I mean, it's possible, I guess, but to me, it doesn't pass the smell test in the same way that going up to 100,000 bytes doesn't pass the smell test.
But, so help me understand, because you probably know a little better, but the claim is that the 100,000 bytes is a contiguous block. Is that true or not?
It is.
Because the way that I understand it is the consensus level rule is you cannot have a script pub key larger than 10 kilobytes. So that would necessitate every operator to be its own script pub key, which means you're liable to the 10,000 byte limit, or it's an invalid transaction, won't relay, won't mine. So that means by definition, the operator would have to be split up into 9 less than 10 KB chunks to be in one transaction. So therefore, it's not one contiguous block. And the argument is that CSAM videos and pictures are going to get stuck in this space and take all cloud nodes.
Yeah, I don't. Well, first of all of that is just binary data, right? And it's somewhere on there, but unless you're a programmer and know how to retrieve it, it's more or less just binary data. Yeah. And that's, I think, true for like the vast majority of people, unless you happen to know how to extract it. Whether it's divvied up or contiguous, it's still, you need some software or some knowledge to extract it. So I don't know if that argument would necessarily hold up in court or whatever. If they want to take down cloud nodes, they can, at any time. That's just the US government can, because the whole thing is like on somebody else's computer, it's not yours. I don't think they need CSAM or any excuse like that to take it down. If they wanted to, they have plenty of other weird sort of laws to do that. So I honestly wouldn't worry about that particular angle. The angles that I'm concerned with are sort of like a contentious consensus process, which I think is very possible now. And just the amount of spam that's going to be going through, and sort of like a revival of shitcoins on Bitcoin. But yeah.
So you get a book. So which book do you want? He has he's written Fiat Ruins Everything, which is his new book, the Little Bitcoin book. We got Thank God for Bitcoin, and then Programming Bitcoin.
Which one do I want?
What type of person are you?
Come up here.
I want to learn about the technology.
The programming.
Awesome.
There you go.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're
No
welcome.
problem.
Congrats.
All right. Next question. Amy? Topher, what do you got?
So, Bitcoin is over 100K,
Uh-huh.
and miners are struggling to fill a block.
Uh-huh.
So, do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing when you think about like the current use case for Bitcoin as a payment network? And where do you see mining going?
Yeah, that's a lot of questions there. First, like Bitcoin blocks not being full, like there's always fun in either direction. Right? When it's full, it's like no one can transact. You know, when there's there's a mining death spiral or something. There's all like for me, I've been through this enough times where I'm just like, it is what it is, right? It goes up sometimes, it goes down sometimes. It's like high tide, low tide. It's just part of nature. You just sort of deal with it. It doesn't have to mean anything. It doesn't have to indicate anything. It just kind of is. Price, well, that just sort of indicates demand for Bitcoin. We'll see where that goes. Hopefully it continues more this year, but it's entirely possible. But after you've been in it a while, it's you control what you can control. You can't control what other people are doing. So blocks might be full, blocks might be empty, and price might be high, price might be low. None of those things are really under your control. Just sort of sit back and do what you can. Now, as far as payment network, I think the Bitcoin as a payment network is doing fantastic. There's a stat from Elizabeth Stark that I learned recently. 4 years ago, we were doing about $10 million of Lightning activity per year. Currently, we're doing 10 billion. That's 1,000x in 4 years. That's pretty good. Now, a lot of people are like, but we're not using it for coffee payments down the street, and how come not everyone's taking it? It's like, okay, you're just like a little impatient, right? Like 1,000x in 4 years by any objective standard is like pretty amazing. And if we get another 1,000x from here, that's pretty much like something like 30% of all transactions in the US or something like that. It's like an insane number. So we're on a pretty good trajectory. I don't think you need to, speed up the eschaton or something like that, right? You just have to wait and let it be, and it'll grow on its own because people see the utility. Right? It doesn't the knowledge about the Lightning Network, all of the benefits and things like that, that information spread isn't instant. And oftentimes people need to see it to believe it and use it to get used to it and all that stuff. And merchants need to see their benefits and all that. And there are lots of opportunities along there. Right? And it's up to the entrepreneurs to, again, make that happen. Like I said, if you can go into a traditional business and integrate Bitcoin into it, you probably have significant advantage over your competitors. That's where there's a big arbitrage opportunity, I think. And I think that's how a lot of this stuff happens. Because I've seen companies that are sort of like browbeaten into accepting Bitcoin, and then like a month later they're like, no, we don't take Bitcoin anymore. You have to have the actual Bitcoiners go into those businesses. That's much easier path of Bitcoin adoption in payment terms than to try to convert all these fiat people that have been making a profit already. They don't feel the need for it. So it is happening, it is going to happen, and it is honestly up to many of you to go and build some of this stuff.
Awesome. Topher, come get a book. We have next question. Let's go. I think Jim had his hand up first.
So we talked to some devs, they'll argue that we need to scale self-custody, like the metric over is like 10% of the developed world, something like that. Self-custody for that, otherwise there's risks around fractional reserves banking or something like that, re-emerging. You maybe steel man that, and then maybe explain why, what your alternative idea of a good solution, or maybe why it's not a problem.
Yeah. So fear is that if you don't have enough people self-custody, then you have giant centralized silos where there's like a large amount of Bitcoin. And as soon as you have sort of a trusted relationship, fractional reserve banking becomes a very tempting possibility. Now, what has happened in the past with gold is that happened a lot with gold, is that there would be a run on the bank. Right? As soon as people thought this place was insolvent, everyone would take it out. And that place would go bankrupt, some people would lose their money, usually the people at the end of the line, right? The people that were last to try to come in and get it. Although nowadays, like with places like Cyprus, what happened in 2012, they just like gave everyone an equal haircut, right? Instead of whoever is last in line gets loses everything. But that was a common occurrence, and this is the fear. Thing is though, those are self-correcting mechanisms, because as soon as you have that giant centralized entity and they do issue paper Bitcoin or something like that, the withdrawal mechanism on chain, right, like self-custody, that's what will cause them bankruptcy. And there's no real bailout in Bitcoin because you can't print. That's why a lot of central banks actually started. It was a way to auto bail out a lot of these fractional reserve banks and sort of codify fractional reserve banking. So by doing that, by not having a central bank, I think it corrects itself. So I don't think it's as big a fear as it should be, because that's ultimately an economics claim that fractional reserve banking bad, therefore, we shouldn't be doing. Everyone should self-custody from the beginning. No, there are going to be some institutions that try that, and they're going to go bankrupt. We saw a bunch already, right? What was Mt. Gox? What was FTX? Fractional reserve banking, right? Trusted relationship. And so I don't think that's necessarily a problem. And the solution is that people learn over time to self-custody. And like as far as scalability, well, that will come, and there are other methods of self-custody than having an UTXO on chain that will get developed as the need arises. But right now,
like the fact that we further rapid or technologically
yeah, I mean, I think that's what ARC is, right? Like you have like a VTXO or whatever. But I mean, that's one possible solution. I mean, I can't imagine the space of all possible solutions. So I don't know exactly what people will escape to. Who knows? Maybe it's a state chain or something else. But the key is that it has to work for the user. If it sucks for the user, they're not going to use it. But in a scenario where you're about to lose all your money, maybe you jump through a few hurdles, right? And you're willing to learn how to do whatever difficult thing that you need to do in order to have like some custody or something. But that's to be seen, and really honestly, like you need some of those crises for people to learn that lesson.
Yeah, Jim, you want to grab a book? I think one of y'all have a question.
I actually had a very similar question, but I think you kind of answered it. But I have another question, so I'll take it. You talked about, okay, no more soft forks, right? So kind of two-part question. So kind of the age of the protocol devs is ending, and it's the age of the app devs where we need to take the protocol and deliver it to the users through apps. So one, do you agree with that? And two, you talked about like, okay, there's been all these ways to do covenants, right? There's been all these ways to do vaults. And I think of these as like the dark areas of Bitcoin that people don't like to think about. Like that you can pre-sign 1,000 transactions, but then how do we have a business or a trust model around it, right?
Yeah.
Do you think, so one, is it the time for the app devs? And two, do you think that these dark areas are still worth exploring? Or should I just go catch up with where the art guys are at and build off of where they're thinking?
Yeah, oh, great question. is it the time for app devs? I think it's been for a while. Because the user experience around a lot of apps just sucks. It could be a lot better. And, but, you know, unfortunately, like, there's a lot of fiat money going into ideas that aren't necessarily that great, right? So, yeah, kind of have to deal with that, right? It would be more the age of app devs if we were more on a sound money standard and you can sort of gauge what people actually wanted. Right now, people are very distracted and they don't like incentives. Yeah, they're not. And a lot of Bitcoiners are already kind of rich already, so they don't have that many needs per se, right? With respect to securing things. So, you know, the age of app devs might not be here, but the end of the age of protocol devs, I think, is nearby, right? Like, I saw this tweet from our friend Ben Carmen.
Oh, what is that?
He said, you know, what sucks about Bitcoin is that there's nothing to do. And he's kind of right? Like, you just hold, and he's like, well, you know, he wants to work on covenants or, you know, cat VM or whatever the fuck he's working on. But it's like, well, there's no user demand for anything, right? It's like what the users want is a good savings vehicle, and they already have it. They have all the tools, right? And so he's like trying to build for people that are already satisfied with the product that they have. And it's like, yeah, I kind of get that. And I suspect this is true of a lot of protocol devs as well, where they're like, okay, well, what else can I do, right? Like the age of like the golden softworks where you get all the glory for writing SegWit or whatever is over. I don't think that age is coming back where you have this like fantastic thing that you've been rallying for or whatever. I don't think that's coming back. But they're still sort of living like, you know, they're sort of fighting the last war in that way, right? Where they're thinking they're as important as that. Honestly, like, I think where Bitcoin needs to be, will be from protocol development standpoint is bug fixes, stability, reduce attack surface, those sort of things, and maybe even in a softworky way to do those. But it's not, let's have this brand new functionality that does X, Y, and Z. I don't think those are going to be nearly as popular as the savings use case. The vast majority of people use it for. And it's like, well, if that's kind of solved, then, you know, what else is there to do? And that's where, like, a lot of people are getting into payments and thinking about, like, different, and, you know, those are fair things to think about, and there's probably a big market there. But this is why I'm saying, like, the arbitrage is not within Bitcoin. There are a lot of people thinking about stuff. It's in the fiat world where you can bring Bitcoin in. That's the big art play.
Yeah, that's why I think it's so important to do this meetup here, is to grab some people that are working at Capital Factory, so they can see some of the opportunity that's here for putting Bitcoin into their startups. Good question, Austin. You want to grab the last book? Yes, go ahead.
So about your last phase, so we were saying that you want like more shops, I guess, to accept Bitcoin. But at the same time, you say, okay, Bitcoin every year it doubles on value, more on stuff. So I kind of think that Bitcoin is more of a place to store, more than to spend. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why a lot of people don't spend their Bitcoin. Because I told this story about like spending $100 on beef jerky in 2013. Like this beef jerky vendor, and he was taking Bitcoin. I ordered $100 beef jerky. Cost me 0.25 Bitcoin. What do you think? How do you think I feel about that beef jerky?
Jimmy, we were looking back at the old Stacker News Live that we did, and there was like 20,000 sat posts on Stacker News, and I was telling Keon, I was telling Keon, I was like, what were we doing? like 20,000 sat posts. I was just like,
That was like 20 bucks?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
I know what you're saying.
that was a $25,000 beef jerky. It tasted good, but not that good, right? Like, I mean, I could have like requires them to do. No, I don't think we're that far from it, right? And you can see this when you're like using Zaprite or whatever. There's a lot of merchants that will like add like a fiat tax, right? It's 15% more if you're paid with Visa or whatever. They want big things. And then, you know, this is how the Bitcoin economy, I think, evolves. Is that as you have more merchants that are demanding it. Again, if you're going into a fiat business and saying, okay, we'll give you a 10% discount for Bitcoin so that we can keep it in our treasury, again, huge advantage over your competition. That's how that happens, and not through, okay, well, you know, everyone needs to spend it, and we're going to, wag our finger at you if you're not. You know, so.
Yeah, I think you should still accept it as payment. I think you have to consider yourself a fool not to accept it as payment.
But spending it.
But spending it, I mean, I spend all the time. Don't be like me, but I'm a fool. But I definitely accept it as payment as well too. So it's you gotta pick your spots, I guess. Any other questions? Sam?
If the arbitrage is in the fiat world and bringing Bitcoin knowledge there, what can people do who might not be an engineer but understand fundamental parts of Bitcoin?
Yeah, so if you're in any kind of finance, the very obvious play is Bitcoin treasury. Right? You go into any company, keep a significant amount of whatever capital you have in Bitcoin. That's going to be a giant thing.
Well, thanks for giving away my secret recipe, but I should have rephrased my question. What can you do if you're dyslexic and you don't even numbers your code? Which I think is a lot of people operate in that.
It depends on your particular skill set, but surely there's something related to Bitcoin that you can do. Like the career advice that I've given to a lot of people is, okay, whatever you're good at, go do that and add Bitcoin to it. It's not that different than like the people that went out west as well, right? Like this is why we're this hat. The motto used to be go less younger, and the idea was if you stayed where you were, you would have to compete against everybody else that were already there, right? Like the cobblers that have been making shoes for everybody for like the last 30 years. You're not likely to easily take business off of them. But if you go out west where there are no cobblers, well, you're gonna do a lot better, right? So whatever it is you're good at, surely you have some talent. If you have no talent at all, go learn something, right? go figure out something that you can do for money. You have some talent, go find your intersection with Bitcoin, right? You can go out west. You don't have to be a prospector. You don't have to be a farmer or somebody that's good with weapons or whatever. There was plenty of room for all kinds of people out west, right? They needed lawyers, they needed builders, they needed all kinds of people. And Bitcoin is still the West, right? And there's plenty of need for all kinds of services. The story I like to tell is about Patrick Byrne. You guys know who he is? Yeah. Okay.
Arthot?
Yeah. It was that's a different guy, but he has a very similar name. But anyway, I think he's a lawyer, and he started advising Bitcoin startups. I think in 2012. Came out of a mid-tier law school, right? Started advising them, and he started knowing all of the law around Bitcoin. And soon he became like the Bitcoin lawyer. Any Bitcoin startup ended up going to him, like for advice, because he knew all of the law, right? Mid-tier law school, right? And I think he became like lead counsel at Kraken at one point. But like, the point is that whatever skill you have, if you combine it with Bitcoin, there's probably some potent combination. And you can sell to Bitcoiners, or you can serve Bitcoiners in whatever that capacity might be. And that's probably at the very least a decent intersection for whatever skills you have. Definitely.
Got time for one more question before we wrap up. You already asked one. You can ask one. Anybody that didn't ask one yet? That wants to ask one? Oh, Nick, here you go.
When you're writing programming Lightning,
Or programming Nostr, because I saw you mention that.
Programming Lightning. So people have been asking me that since like 2018 when I released Programming Bitcoin. And here's why I didn't write it. It was because the protocol keeps changing, right? And this is one of my reasons why I think we should ossify the protocol. Because back then, post-SegWit, Lightning channels were done a certain way. You had to have 2 of 2 ECBSA signatures, multi-sig, and everything else. But Taproot was on the horizon. Schnorr signatures were on the horizon. So they were like, you know what? We're probably going to change this to be musig, 2 of 2, so that it's a single signature on chain and everyone saves a little money. I was like, okay, but if I write like a programming Lightning thing, then it's going to be obsolete when Taproot comes out. It's probably going to take me like a couple years to write it, so by the time it comes out, it's going to be obsolete right away. So I didn't write it, and this is kind of the problem. Right? And then they were talking about like PTLCs instead of HTLCs and all this other stuff. So it was like, okay, it's not worth writing if it's going to go obsolete like that. And this is the problem with sort of a lot of this stuff. So, for example, if we were to get covenants, and I had a programming Lightning book out right now, and then they have like a covenant software, it would probably obsolete all of that because you could do Lightning very differently. You probably don't even need like a funding transaction. You just have like a channel open transaction and all that stuff, right? Like all of the setup changes, everything changes, and everything I wrote gets nullified. And so
mastering Lightning is already so out of date.
And mastering Bitcoin.
yeah. So that it can so that's why.
Would you do it in 5 years if it stabilized?
Maybe. Yeah, if it's still the most popular L2, I mean, it's entirely possible something else could too. But I wanted to write other stuff, and I have like a lot of material like that I haven't released that I should probably open source at some point. But
Still blog on Lightning and generally, but I was having a conversation with somebody about Lightning, and they were like, we didn't really need SegWit. I'm like, what? We didn't need SegWit. He's like, if you look at how Lightning actually works, 99% of it is custodial, and you don't need all of this like complicated. It's like, ooh, that's a little bit of a black hole on Lightning, but it's like. Kind of right. Like, do we even need SegWit or Taproot? Or do we even need SegWit for Lightning? We could have had a lot of that. Like, a lot of it was like transaction valuability and stuff. But it's like, well, it's kind of custodial anyway. Then it's like, oh.
It's been a great talk, Jimmy. Where can everybody learn more about you, get your books, find you at the next big conference, all that kind of stuff?
ProgrammingBitcoin.com is my website. JimmySong.substack.com is my newsletter. Jimmy Song is my handle on X, and I'm on a bunch of other social media platforms, if you know, that look for me, and I post different things to everywhere. So
Nostr?
yeah, Nostr, among other things. I think I post to 5 different places.
I would definitely recommend subscribing to his newsletter, because that's where you like get all of the Jimmy Alpha. Because at the very least you can see where he travels to and keep up with him. That's the one I always check in with. So thank you again, Jimmy, for doing this. I appreciate you as a friend and for always helping us out. So I appreciate you, Jimmy.
Thank you.
There's some food over there, guys, if you guys are hungry, and we'll be here till just a little bit till 9. So the next Bitcoin Builders meetup will be in November with another guest.
Probably.
I'm gonna script in like this DX, like this software you never heard of. It's like
Why, there was
problem
some
is using software. Some software is out of date. Some
that
software
was
is out of
because I
date.
like
That would have vulnerabilities.
when I was with my family.
And a lot of the focus is
We're like
clearly
going to
like
conferences and stuff, that's like what it used to be.
like he has all these
Much
sections of
younger.
color.
Oh, I get to go on business trips.
Have you heard of color?
That's like, that's.
I mean, nobody that's my age will tell you because they don't know what the fuck is color, right?
There's a way to.
No, it was a way to basically have arbitrary names or have like other protocol assets. There's also a way to count. You could already, I was also but anyway, it's just this concept. It's a little bit away from the most dungeons all of this. So like even for me when I first learned basketball, even today, it was very out of the way. And I was like, so anyway, like obviously the tried and true was like this is how things work. That happened, like how that explains. And even segment has a but just like all this stuff where I told you, run the script, look at this flow, you know, doubt those results. And I think it was really smart. Yeah. Yeah, and it's much more like theoretical. Programming Bitcoin starts the first three chapters. Well, so first of all, the book actually that sounds like a big project, right? Well, it is. It is. So first of all, Python is considered one of the easiest jobs, right? So you know, Python is chosen for the reason of its ease of use, not because it's powerful. Also, the way that you write the node is very much like this is not a node that's meant to be ran. This is a node that's meant to be a school project that you learn all of the pieces of Bitcoin by building it. So that's kind of the whole concept. No, not really. Mastering Bitcoin takes you through a series of like, there's exercises. Exercises are outdated. There's almost no way you can learn them. Like a lot, for example, like a lot of the exercises are on Windows using like Bitcoin. Like, yeah, a lot of them aren't even using Bitcoin or where they there's less. But yeah, program Bitcoin situation like here's Bitcoin as a concept. We can program it. Okay, first we need to learn like elliptic curves of the right now. That's a cryptography. That's where I got stuck when I first learned because I had no previous context on like that kind of cryptography. So for me, I was lost in it. It'll probably be a learning. And then from there, actually after that, just about everything down to like once you generate the keys, all you're doing is like, okay, here's the signature algorithm for generating a signature. Here's the algorithm for generating address. Here's how we validate it. Here's how we validate it, right? From there, all that stuff becomes a lot more simple and just like systematic. Where it's like the beginning part is much more theoretical. Introducing this whole concept of how we do deterministic cryptography in these hugely large spaces, but they're not infinitely large. And we can draw a person and do math. To me, it seems like rocket science. Nowadays, exactly. So I bet this plus ChatGPT will be a lot easier now. It's going to be like, okay, Jimmy told me to write this code, you know, screenshot, take a picture of the phone, but I don't really know this. Like, he doesn't really explain this. Like, what does this actually mean? You know, like if I had ChatGPT, I probably would have blazed through the book.
I didn't realize it was.
even then, in hindsight, like if we're at the beginning of 2018 again, and we know what we know now, you might say like, it's not worth the risk, because we're not going to use any of this stuff. You know, imagine in 2018, you'd be like, oh yeah, in 2025, Taproot would have been around for like 4 or 5 years, but almost no one is using it. The only thing it's being used for is JPEGs, and then a few niche protocol things that almost no one's using and no one understands.
Think about,
And then,
single segment,
so, I mean, this is where I'm so interested, like, working on props or props or something that's so interesting. The Schnorr signatures allow you to do miraculous, amazing things off-chain. Because you can have this one, essentially like single address on-chain, single sig. That's all that anyone sees. But off-chain, this single sig can actually be 5 of 10, you can do all this crazy shit with it, you turn it from a 5 of 10 into a 10 of 20, and then back into a 1 of 2. And then all that's happening off-chain, and then on-chain on this single. So that's Schnorr. So Schnorr signatures are extremely powerful. But even then, Schnorr signatures reintroduce exactly. So even then, there's a trade-off because there's more expressivity to it. And you might say that, hey, if like going from ACDSA to Schnorr, you might say, oh well, Schnorr, maybe we don't have any use cases now, but it's so much more expressive. It'll obviously be better. But then I might say in 2018, well, what about Quantum? Because with script hashes, we can really protect ourselves from Quantum, but we're going to undo that by having key strings. But even then, you might not have been able to predict them on key strings because I'm nearly confident through script spins, I think you can hide the pub key returns, right? Which is a pattern. So it's possible you can still leverage Taproot. Anyway, yeah, like once you actually look back in hindsight, what's on, there's like this thing over here, this thing over
So
here.
if you could label one, say,
That would be too. I just don't know. Like it's too many. I'm too homeless, but there's too many unknown. In a lot of ways, the reality that I'm living in has to be one of the like how could you make things anymore? Like especially think about the loss I did. It's like given how dire and urgent.
you think that, are you undecided on whether you select?
No, I'm decided. I'm just like, holy shit. Even though there was a right answer in the season, all of the possibilities of what happened, we came out of that shitstorm pretty honestly. And you look back and it's like, wow, how did we make that? Like, not only did we come out, relatively apart, but we came out with actually a new kind of art, a new kind of understanding, which was that consensus is king, and also the Pletzer.
Something about like the way
The Pletzer house.
It doesn't seem like, I was only on the level that I was pretty out.
Anyway, but
I missed the whole walk.
there's a club.
It doesn't seem like either, it almost seems like what was learned here is some of the everybody's still in the box size normal, and now we're getting each other and everybody doesn't. Even should it be.
I agree with that, but like you imagine the worried about like the overwhelming majority of information and interest around Bitcoin goes all around changing custodian shit and using it for as many things as possible. Right. It's bad to have arguing tribes that argue about like shit and allow nothing to happen and like waste a bunch of time. Right? That's kind of where we're at. But then you compare that to before where it's like we don't really understand this thing. We're playing with it. We're trying to do a million things at once. There's extreme centralization of power. It's not even really understood. It has eyes. And the adversarial nature very simple performance, right? And it's like, I would much rather, if you just put me into a parallel universe, I would much rather be in a parallel universe where worlds are and things are much more ossified with the really valuable state, versus the world where
The government's gonna get
there's trials ahead and we're all still deciding.
And if you study some history, this is what happens.
I'm pretty, it would be, I would have to be bold if you was to say, yeah, give me the wand, I'm gonna wait until and like make, put us in a better world. I don't know, because if there's any lesson, it's that there's unknown methods, even the smartest.
Whatever your issue is, just be very
Second.
like there's not security.
Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm wrong.
And who's to say, I don't even know. I mean, I'm in the middle. I initially,
But they kind of want to be.
Right,
yeah.
but it's still,
I mean,
your issue,
I was so heavily involved.
being in the background, like the excuse that, oh, well,
It was all heavily involved, and I was talking to a lot of people. What's different about me is I don't talk a lot. Well, I probably should, but I didn't talk a lot. I have a very developed, it's all the same, but very developed side, very dark. I wrote narratives, and having a sort of like backup plans or the previously initially my position was, you just made me be a free form of your you know that, because I was just minding my business and doing my business, and all of a sudden I woke up one day and found out that some configuration options I had since the beginning of
Why are you putting them
it was my financial review at your business. And then in turn, I had to read and then I had to read fucking Clementine Citria White. There was 2 reasons in that was listed in that original deal. And the 2 things that are listed is that you could use Libra relays to get around the policy. He wrote it on behalf of yes, Libra relays. So there's 2 things mentioned. It's like people can already write about it. Also, now Citria, because they don't have large they are now starting to utilize which is a worse effect. And it's happening. Therefore, we should support this case. And also protect ourselves at the same time and allow this to be reasonable argument. Let's step back from that situation. Let me give you an analysis of how I think about this extra data kind of thing. There's 3 ways to stuff extra data. There is witness, there's opportunity, and there's unspendable. Keep those in mind. Also, that is a generalization, and it covers 99%. And then, okay, so let's start with witness. Witness. Now, what does witness do? How does witness do? People put out sure. And so there's the idea of affecting my hardness and affecting my RAM. Exactly. So for witness, witness affects not my RAM because it's not the UTXO set. It simply affects my hardness because I'm storing that extra witness data, I'm storing the transaction. Okay, so let's actually say RAM and hardness, right? Compute is actually the variable validation. You would maybe say that witness affects my compute and my hardness. Not really. return attached well, my compute and my hard disk, if I'm good on it, because you know you can kind of prune off returns, but only after you validate. So you have to validate them first, then you can prune. Okay, and then unspinnable hubs. That spans my RAM, my compute, and my hard disk.
Only a certain mark down that, the most recent transactions that we kept in memory. A lot of them are copied.
It's all of the. I was shocked. Even OG. So this is it. This is what
It was chain state.
I was like, who are all these? Well, that's what chain state is. The actual.
But I mean, what I'm saying is, I don't think the entire UTXO set is kept in.
You're right. It's not the entire UTXO set. It is the outputs that are waiting to be spent. But there's some other relation there, I feel like, where it's like, Bitcoin Core's a little bit smarter than that, where it's like, okay, but also not just all the outputs that are going to spin, but the ones that potentially you could interact with. I forget. I feel like there's some hidden criteria that I'm thinking about there. Yeah. But either way, so I think about that like framework of like three ways and stuff like that. How it affects you. Okay, now let's go back to our situation. And then I go back to Citria. And I look at it and I realize that the Citria risk is actually overblown because where Citria uses these unspinnable keys is only in their emergency Exactly. It's their original justice transaction, which there was some estimation or number of all the potential, you know, of those that could even happen. And then all of a sudden you realize, like, wait, this is nothing. Obviously, unspinnable pub key is bad if you do that as this huge monster. That's scary. But then Clemens does it with usage. It's actually not bad. We could have looked at that and realized, like, hold on, this isn't an immediate threat, but it's telling us something interesting that might be looking ahead. So let's sit on our hands and think about it. So this was my initial position. I wanted to sit on my hands and think about it, not be forced to be a PR resource. And then things just kept moving, and I just thought it was so fucking frustrating. I pulled out a little bit because I was arguing with one and not I know them so well and respect a lot of guys. Critiqued them on their argument. I was the one telling them. Before the you need that's a bad analogy. That's a bad analogy. Yes. And I was telling him that. Because he told me that. I'm like, what? I was expecting you to come here with some fucking fire ass argument. Absolutely inarguable. And I feel like I can muster up a few arguments. I can make a few of those. It's like the way I said it. Socratic kind of arguments. For example, one of my arguments is that the burden of change should be on those trying to make the change and not those trying to prove the change. Therefore, the burden of proof for the Citria vector is not proper. You know, so like that's something that like that's an argument that people fall to without necessarily oh, but I'm pro-filter. It's like, well, maybe I'm not pro-filter. And the thing is, I wasn't. I was anti-filter stuff for the reasons of like because I was afraid of the world where mid-pools are looking more and more different, how that affects lightning, how that causes all these other second-order effects that we don't understand. I was against it. So they radicalized me very quickly. And then I kind of pulled back over. And now I'm begrudgingly in the middle. Frustrated not, because I feel like they're not doing what I feel like I have to think that I want to get across. They're not doing it. There's not the space for me to know what these look like. And I have to think about it. And then on the core side, where it's lots of gaslighting, lots of leading, lots of like, you should be smart enough to not talk over this detail. You should be smart enough to have this level of conversation.
Because I felt the same way, right? So, you know, I reached out to my own January this year. They're basically just, you know, removing what I and stuff like that. I really feel huge step. Basically just removing morning, night, coming in. I really understand that. So I'm way behind.
Me too. I was really feeling like,
Doesn't mean they're wrong, but they were pretty good snacks. But then now I've got so many hardcore I can't believe these assholes are gonna do this to me. And then I started to learn a little bit more and started to first off. A lot. So either they don't know or they're blind. Either way, they're all separate. They either know it well enough. Or they do know it and they're blind. Either way, it's not acceptable. That's where I kind of like if I really listen, I was like, well, maybe it really is true. If they don't,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I'm not technical, I'm not technical. But you'll see very technical stuff.
And what do they do? And they're like, like to hold a little bit of
the removal of the ability that seems really, a lot of people.
that's a very, like, we don't need to know how you would do that. Like, that can be a simple thing. It's like, there's an option you have. It's being, it was originally just going to be, now it's being deprecated. It will be.
There is a middle way, right?
Right? There's that concept, and then there's the concept of core saying that, well, we need to make good choices. And the old default response to this, and the default would be good for them to so that just like so like I feel like as a non-technical user, you can appreciate this default without being technical. It's like, okay, well, on one side we have like the configurable defaults, and then on the other side we have like good defaults that just work. Because most people aren't ever going to
make sure, I don't know, like the point where that's possible is when all this that doesn't happen, then like it, like because
they're powerful features that they could control your nose.
I think it was like a itself,
with that explanation,
and it's a time to wrap it
allow
up.
you to
Recipes
does that
then it would
so
be
why
like,
would you
and you stop
the
it with
ability to figure something that's super beginning? So
you know what I mean? Like,
they just
like you could have every multi-sync too, so that's like,
so now,
but then it's like,
you're under arrest.
you know what I mean? It's like, okay, spin up the news, you know what I mean? The robot is the next one to see this.
We'll get a point of disabling it, but they're giving you a switch right underneath it. That's just different starts. It doesn't stop you from being able to do it. You can still do it.
And then be like, okay, now you have
Just like the other industry, get it, you can go on and buy a price, you can take the dash off, you can look at the video, you can fix that.
Yeah, no, I actually like that argument because I think in that world it is pretty much solid. It's like, okay, well, in this scenario it's a little bit different. It's a private company. So, you know, core is the audio manufacturing. So they're just saying like, we get it, we're Grace Monkeys too, we want to customize our radio. Come on, we have to have tools that for one stick to the law, for two just like serve like technology use case and allow most of the things to have the best and so it's like you kind of can't blame them for that, but at the same time you want to have a marketplace where I can go plus that their built-in system or my own system that I can customize. And if anything, I think that your argument is actually beautifully right for me because it serves to the fact that like, look, Core's got to do their due diligence given the reality of Bitcoin, what's at play. But then also at the same time we realize that Bitcoin is used by users on the team, and we want to have that option to protect that option. And this is what Notch should be for. Though necessarily Notch doesn't really represent that option for me. For other reasons, but if you look at it very simply, I think that's a good argument. You're just like, yes, we want to have people know this. good defaults, and then there's the configurable
You can
stuff.
still do it, you just don't do it for the food.
That's fine, but I think that already going to bitcoin.com is pretty big. I think that's and this is why my original point was change the default. Change the default. Why did you go from 0 to remove? Because you just woke me from didn't care to care more than anything. If the PR would have been, hey, because of the Citria thing and because of Relay, we're changing the default, I would have never acted. And I would have never that's not a salary.
That's how you find out about it.
I get your point. The thing is, filters are not they're not a binary of works or doesn't work. Because you can apply that framework to it, but you're oversimplifying. You're honestly are. If there's 0 filters, what is the cost of listening? Versus if there's 90% filters, which are ineffective, what is the cost of listening? And there's data to back up how cost that filters incur on people. There's data to back that up. There's also there's lots of research. Simusol's got it. He does a lot of this research on how much filter dominance you need on the network to really start to affect cost. No, it's much lower. Once again, these are in simulations. So what do you say? No, either way, it's like a simulation. And you start orders of magnitude at 60%. The fee is and then finally, this is what it's super but yeah, he's realized people don't actually know the case. I know.
And making fun
I know, but like,
I want to know all the secrets that we can produce by it.
he will, he used to live here. He always has a secret agenda. So while he may appear, he's not. He's friends with them. And they know. Anyways, there's inside baseball that, not wink like the standing people, but like, Super's got his own filter dials. It's not the same. So, I mean,
they're developing something. And I was like, that goes perfect with like the kind of menu.
and that's the thing, it's like choose your fighter. It's like, I don't want to choose any of these fighters.
Yeah, I ain't going on personality, but that's experience, their reputation, and their what they're bringing to it. And their personality.
You got the right message. I ideally don't want to be
Somebody else do it, I want to learn from it.
Alright, everybody, we're gonna be heading out now. So grab your stuff. We'll be meeting in the lobby. You guys want to keep talking?
As plebs, we have to realize what can I do, what should I do, what's empowering to me, what role do I want to play. In a lot of ways, I'm still figuring that out. Like, I want to have these conversations. I'm frustrated at the conversations. I do believe in real Socratic debate, where you establish, for example, commonality first, and then you can argue on that foundation. That's something. There's no good debate. In such a way where you can't figure out what's real by hearing both sides.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
No problem, sir. Thank you for coming. Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Just want to say thank you. Appreciate it.
Did you get the sign?
Huh?
Did you get a sign?
No, I didn't, but that's okay. I'll just read it. Thanks.
I actually I was just telling you, I was like, bro, I'm like, getting
hit that pass earlier. Got it?
And we make very good.
It was here when I came.
I hit that pass earlier.
Is that what they got? I told you this.
So do you know whose book is that?
Found inspiration.
Oh, no, I know Cliff, I told you last time how if you're programming Bitcoin, but Lawrence told my dad.
Yeah.
He's like a mechanical engineer, and he's like, I don't get it, and then as soon as he writes, like,
Jimmy, how profound is that? Like, that's how it changed a lot of people's lives.
Sold a lot of copies.